Well, after months of negotiations, Prime Minister Carney and Premier Smith have announced a pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast. Hannah Lapine is in this morning. Hannah, walk us through the proposal.
Jefferson, it is a massive step forward for Alberta's energy sector. The Premier and Prime Minister offered some much anticipated details about what the new million-barrel-per-day crude oil pipeline from our province to the BC southern coast will look like, along with the industry partners now on board. The proposed line will be moving forward through a public-private investment. Smith said the Alberta government is partnering with federally owned Trans Mountain Corporation and Calgary-based Pembina Pipeline to build and operate what has officially been labeled the West Coast Pipeline. It would run from Bruderheim, northeast of Edmonton, to a terminal in Delta, BC, just south of Vancouver.
Canada is taking a bold step that could make the country stronger than ever in the energy world. This plan could create new opportunities, support workers, and help Canadian oil reach more markets with greater freedom. But there is one major reason behind this decision that has everyone paying close attention. In July 2026, three governments signed two separate agreements within 24 hours that together constitute the most coordinated federal-provincial alignment Canada has ever produced on a West Coast oil pipeline. The federal government and BC signed the Canada-British Columbia Cooperative Prosperity Agreement on July 2nd. The federal government and Alberta issued a joint statement advancing the West Coast pipeline proposal on July 3rd, the day Alberta submitted its formal 1 million barrel per day pipeline proposal to the federal major projects office. For the first time in Canadian energy history, Ottawa, Edmonton, and Victoria are operating from the same document at the same time on the same pipeline concept. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith stood together at a press conference in Calgary and announced something that changes the commercial geography of Canadian energy for the next generation. The federally owned Trans Mountain Corporation will plan and construct a new West Coast oil pipeline. Calgary-based Pembina Pipeline Corporation will be the private sector partner. Canada and Alberta will be equal partners in the project. Indigenous communities will hold a meaningful equity stake. The proposed route runs from Bruderheim, northeast of Edmonton, to the Roberts Bank terminal in Delta, British Columbia largely following the existing Trans Mountain pipeline corridor to BC's southwest coast. The pipeline will carry more than 1 million barrels of oil per day. The cost estimate in Alberta's submission to the Federal Major Projects Office is documented and specific, between $35.2 billion and $43.7 billion, including contingencies. That range makes this the largest energy infrastructure project in Canadian history, surpassing the $34 billion Trans Mountain expansion that entered service in May 2024. The submission was filed with the Major Projects Office on July 2nd, 2026, one day after the July 1st deadline set by the May 15th Carney-Smith implementation agreement. Alberta's government contributed just over $18 million to support the early planning work that produced the submission, preliminary engineering, cost estimates, economic modeling, and early Indigenous engagement. The route decision itself represents a significant reversal of Premier Smith's previous public position. For months leading up to the submission, Smith had been advocating for a northern route to BC's north coast, closer to Asian shipping lanes. Internal Alberta planning documents obtained through an ATIP request and published in June 2026 had shown three northern route options being evaluated. All of them would have required amendments to the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, federal legislation prohibiting crude oil tankers from loading at terminals on BC's north coast, which BC Premier David Eby and Coastal First Nations had made clear they would vigorously oppose. After studying northern and southern route options, Smith determined that a pipeline from Bruderheim to a deepwater port terminal on BC's southwest coast offered the fastest, most cost-effective path to expanding Canada's energy exports. The South Coast route avoids the tanker moratorium entirely. The two route options submitted, the original corridor and the optimized corridor, both follow the Trans Mountain pipeline footprint through most of their length. For the original corridor, approximately 92% of the route is within 100 meters of existing infrastructure or already disturbed land. For the optimized corridor, that figure is 82%, with more than 120 kilometers of the route diverging more than 300 meters from the original pipeline. The Trans Mountain precedent is the specific legal, and regulatory foundation that makes the southern route the fastest path to construction. The courts, the environmental assessment processes, and the Indigenous consultation framework along that corridor have all been traversed once already. A new pipeline following the same right-of-way builds on that precedent rather than starting from zero. Trans Mountain Corporation's role as lead proponent is the structural element that separates this proposal from every previous Alberta to Pacific pipeline attempt. Trans Mountain is a federal crown corporation that already operates the 890,000 barrel per day expansion that entered service in May 2024. Its engineering teams know the corridor. Its relationships with Indigenous communities along the Trans Mountain right-of-way are established. Its regulatory history with the National Energy Regulator is extensive. Pembina Pipeline Corporation's 10% stake through construction with the option of an additional 10% upon commercial operation brings private sector operational expertise and financial discipline to a project that is otherwise primarily publicly owned. The project represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to advance nation-building energy infrastructure that strengthens Canada's economy and expands access to global markets for Canadian energy, said Scott Burrows, Pembina's chief executive. The commercial rationale for the pipeline is documented in the price differential data that the Trans Mountain expansion has already produced. Before the TMX entered service, Western Canadian Select consistently traded at a $20 to $25 per barrel discount to West Texas Intermediate, a discount entirely attributable to pipeline export constraints that gave American refineries pricing power over Alberta crude. After TMX entered service, that differential compressed to approximately $12 to $15 per barrel as Pacific market competition reduced American buyers' leverage. Alberta's own submission to the Major Projects Office projects the new pipeline could narrow the WCS-WTI price gap by an additional $3 per barrel. Applied across Alberta's current production of approximately 3.8 million barrels per day, every dollar of differential improvement generates approximately $3.8 million in additional daily producer revenue, roughly $1.4 billion per year per dollar of improvement. Alberta's stated goal is to double provincial oil production from approximately 3.8 million barrels per day to 8 million barrels per day over the next 10 years. The existing Trans Mountain system, at 890,000 barrels per day to the Pacific, cannot handle half of current production at capacity, let alone double production. A 1 million barrel per day addition to Pacific export infrastructure is not aspirational given that growth target. It is the minimum additional capacity required to keep the differential improvement that the TMX delivered from reversing as production grows. The pipeline's construction is tied explicitly to the Pathways Carbon Capture and Storage Project, formerly the Pathways Alliance, now operating as the Oil Sands Alliance through the May 15th implementation agreement and confirmed in Thursday's Calgary announcement. Carney confirmed that Ottawa, Alberta, and the Oil Sands Alliance have agreed on the terms to launch the Pathways Project. The Pathways Project is designed to reduce emissions from participating oil sands operations by approximately 16 million tons annually. It is expected to become the world's largest carbon capture and storage infrastructure project. The pipeline and the carbon capture project are mutually dependent. One provides the export economics that fund the other's emissions reductions, while the other provides the environmental credibility that makes the pipeline politically sustainable. The timeline is documented in Alberta's submission and confirmed by both governments. The national interest listing is targeted for October 1st, 2026. Early construction work, finalizing routes, engaging with Indigenous groups, securing permits, and preparing construction sites could begin as early as September 1st, 2027.